thousands of people filled the streets of this Paris suburb on what would have been Adama Traore's 28th birthday. It's the same suburb where Traore died exactly 4 years ago while being detained by the National Guard. The movement today is led by his sister, Asa.
Sur le racisme qui se passe ici en France sur les personnes racisées.
The situation of racism in Europe, especially in France, is currently hotly reported in various media in the world. Cases such as Islamophobia, racial and gender inequality is one of the problems related to racism that exists in Europe, especially in France. Racism is a belief system or doctrine which states that biological differences inherent in the human race determine cultural or individuality. That one race is superior and has the right to rule another race.
Some examples of cases such as in 2016, Commission on Human Rights reported that 8% of French people believe that some races are superior to others. The 2015 terrorist attacks in France are believed to have caused more Islamophobia, while social reaction against Muslims increased the number of racist acts. When Islamophobia attacks in France throughout 2019 rose to 54%, Abdallah Zekri, president of the National Islamophobia Watchdog Agency, on January 2020 said there were around 100 attacks against Muslims in France in 2018, and a year later the number rose to 154 cases of Islamophobia across France. Apart from the problem of Islamophobia, racism against race are also a problem in France, such as the French response to George's death in the US.
French President Emmanuel Macron on Sunday, 14 June 2020, promised to fight racism. However, he said that France would not take down statues of controversial colonial-era figures. It was the first time Macron had spoken on the issues since George Floyd's death in the United States, which had sparked protests around the world, including French. Demonstrants have expressed outrage at the racial injustice and police brutality, particularly against minorities from the former French colony in Africa. He also emphasized not to compromise in the face of racism, anti-Semitism, and discrimination. However, he stressed that France will not take down the statues of controversial era figures as had happened in several other countries in recent weeks, amid calls for removing statues associated with the French slave trade or colonial misconduct. Macron said he would not erase the traces or name of its history.
Like many governments around the world, Macron is facing increasing pressure to oppose racism and police violence. At least 15,000 people demonstrated in Paris on Saturday, the latest in a series of French protests sparked by George Floyd's death in the United States and Black Lives Matter movement, but increasingly focused on tension within France itself between police and minorities. And we as a French delegation argue that cases like racism in the world must be resolved, because that difference suddenly lead to such heinous acts as racism. Therefore, we must be active and dare to speak up to resolve this case.
Delegate perspective on the role of youth in addressing tolerance and racism. The role of the community, especially the youth, in handling these cases is very important. In the views of our delegation, the role of youth in tolerance and racism will be of great help in combating this issue, because youth can use non-traditional or modern methods such as the spread of campaigns through social media in a more creative and digestible way. As we know, the use of social media today is very broad and quite helpful to reach further distribution and have a greater impact than the methods used by adults who seem more rigid in handling existing issues. Such as in our country, France, the youth who are members of anti-racism organization make several efforts to combat racism cases, such as conducting street campaigns or doing it on social media. This proves that the role of youth in handling this case is indeed very important, because with the youth action conducting campaign in a more flexible manners, the voices of the public will be heard more widely.
With the explosion of racism in Europe, including in our country, the French government has promised and affirmed that racism must be stopped. Even the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, said France will fight against racism. Macron admitted that a person's address, name, skin color can reduce their chance of succeeding in French society. However, he calls for a struggle to ensure that everyone can find their place regardless of their origin, ethnicity, or religion. He also promised not to compromise in the face of racism, anti-Semitism, and discrimination.
Racism is not only a matter of color. It is about discrimination against other people, such as because of language, culture, generation, sexual orientation, religion, and social economic status. Generally, racist behavior is based on appearance, assessing a group as superior or inferior to others, and the third considers that certain traits are inherited in certain groups. Therefore, to fight the racism, we must know how are you because of the racist ideology. Knowing the root causes, we can understand why the ideology and practice of racism must be confronted with all the might and with all the greatest respect.
Hello everyone, my name is Dava Muhammad Rizkisha.
Bersama UMY
Tiara Ismahendra,
Maharani, Mrs. Zakar Pamas Warif,
Jauharin Fadaf,
Jasmine Zulu Ramadhani,
Gala Gadis Michelle Sedina,
Rizaki Adestinata,
act with sympathy, stand in solidarity, live in serenity.